Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. I am your host, and I'm actually here today with my co-author, Danny Coleman. Danny is a master level coach in the personal development space. He is also a premier expert in leadership, doing corporate trainings in that world. We actually wrote a book together, this book right here called Tribe, which is one of my favorite books that I've written. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about this book in a sense, but what I wanted to do is get Danny on, have a conversation, and one of the things we were just talking about before we came on is what should we cover? And one of the interesting things about Danny, I think this about him, he kind of sees me this way. Of course, neither one of us will own this, but it's funny because he sees me this way and I see him this way, is that we're each people who we go to for help. So usually there's not many people in my life who I really want to talk to or I will open up to when I'm dealing with stuff. I usually am the person that people come to for help. But Danny is one of the few that I go to. And Danny feels the same about me. And we're talking about this idea is why is that certain people actually feel compelled to be around other people. We talked about it in this book, Danny, if you remember in the beginning, that when I was a kid, I used to be fascinated by why were some of my teachers in elementary school really well liked, why some weren't, why some of my classmates were picked on, why some weren't, what was it? It was like this energetic thing that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And I really, sort of that followed me into adulthood. And it's really interesting, right? Because now it's the career that you and I have is really trying to understand the dynamics of individuals. And so I'll just start us out with the statement that you made. There's this idea that when you run into somebody or you meet somebody or you have a friend, that we're each unique and individual. And this will be my first sort of question to you, Danny, or statement to see where you want to go with this. We're all individuals. And you might say, well, what is it about Jade or Danny or me that makes me unique and, makes people attracted to me or not attracted to me, makes people feel good around me or not good around me, makes people want to come to me for advice or go to someone else? And I think really it's 3 things. And I want to see what you think about this, Danny. I think it's the energy we bring, right? Like there's an energy that when someone walks into a room, you feel it, right? And we humans don't oftentimes think about this, but even if you're in a room, when someone comes in, even if they say nothing, it changes the energy of the room if you're paying attention. So we each come with a particular energy, right? We also, as we begin to engage and people, talk to us and the way we animate and just the way we, move about, we are a particular experience as well, right? We create an experience in the room. So it's not just our energy, but it starts to become a full experience. And then, of course, we have the ability to set a particular example as well. We can be inspiring and we can influence. And so I think it comes down to this sort of, there's a particular energetic, there's a particular sort of experience that we bring, and then there's this, sort of example that we set. And I want to unpack this with you and get your thoughts around why is this and how do we cultivate this in a positive way, perhaps to be more effective in our personal relationships and also positively impact people.
Yeah, I love this phrase. This is your phrase, and this is about to be a hostile takeover, man. I'm about to get Jade on my podcast right now. We're going to do a swap. So welcome to Take Care Radio, everyone. This is a hostile takeover, but I love this phrase that you have. You say, as human beings, we are an experience. And that to me encaptures everything you were just talking about. Like it encapsulates the energy, it encapsulates the example, it encapsulates everything that we say and everything we emote. It reminds me of that Maya Angelou quote. Maya Angelou, Winston-Salem native, shout out.
Winston-Salem.
As you are, yeah. Sort of Winston-Salem native, right? Were you born there? No. You're born in New York.
There. Definitely grew up there, though. Born in New York, grew up in Winston, yeah.
Yeah, I knew that. Maya Angelou is that quote, people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I love that quote. I think it's a guiding quote in a lot of my work. I work with a lot of leaders, and I teach this concept called emotional contagion. You know, I love my psychology books, man, and one of my favorite concepts I've ever come across is they're able to measure this. They're able to measure how contagious our energy is, how contagious our emotion is. There's this thing called mirror neurons, and I know you're familiar, Jade, but just for the audience, these mirror neurons, they can actually see these areas of the brain firing off when somebody does something. For example, if I yawn, the same centers in your brain to get you to yawn. That's why yawning is so contagious, or laughter is so contagious. A lot of these things, there's something in this is like the 15th century. Have you heard of this, dude? In France, this lady, I don't know what was wrong with her. She starts just dancing in the middle of the street.
I've heard about this, yeah.
Yeah, for like an hour just dancing, and then all of a sudden another guy starts dancing. This is a true thing. This is a true phenomenon. This is how they always describe mirror neurons and things like that. Then all of a sudden, the entire town square is dancing for hours and hours and hours. And it's crazy to me that is how contagious we are and how connected we are as human beings. So I always love this phrase that you have, is that you are an experience. And we work with a lot of professionals who coach other people, who lead other people. And it's so much more potent when we're in that position of authority too. So if I'm a leader, my emotions are going to be 10x more contagious just because of the dynamic there. Or romantic relationships is going to be a lot more contagious than to a stranger. So the closer you get, the more there's a dynamic. There's more a dynamic of power. The more influential, the more contagious you're going to be. So I always kind of joke when I'm training these like leaders, managers, I go, leaders don't get the luxury of having a bad day. You just don't. And that doesn't mean, I say that tongue in cheek, it doesn't mean you can't make up for it. It doesn't mean you can't apologize. It doesn't mean you can't be in a bad mood every once in a while. But on some level, as a leader, or if you just for self-development, you want to be a better experience for other people, you do have to be a little bit better at emotional regulation. You do have to be a little bit more energetic and bring the energy into the room. I'm all over the place right now, Jay. It's reminding me of when you used to train metabolic effect classes back in the day. And you used to teach on this. Remember, you used to teach as a personal trainer or as a group instructor, the number one thing is you have to bring energy. You have to project. You have to move. You have to be big. You have to just demonstrate authority, because that's how you influence and move people. And that was one of the most impactful things that stuck with me now that I teach courses, now that I do these workshops. I got to show up with some energy and bring it, because it's that contagious. So that's sort of setting the stage on my side of what I want to talk about as well. We're saying the same thing here, but you, Jade, I brought this up because it's funny. It feels like everyone in our life, we share a lot of the same circle, and everybody in our life comes to you for help, man. They're like, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to call Jade. I joked before we got on. When I'm having a bad day, I think about calling you, but then I'm like, nah, this dude's already talked to coach 10 people today. So when it comes to, that's sort of what I want to break down in this podcast. What are the elements of this? So if we establish, yes, you're an experience, and your emotions and your state is really contagious, how do you change that state, and how do you just become a more positive experience? So I would love your thoughts on the how. How do we sort of create that? What if I'm not that, Jay? What if I'm boring, or what if people don't really gravitate towards me, etc.?
Yeah. Well, it's why I want to have this conversation with you as well, because you and I both read psychology research all the time. And so I'm going to give my answer, and then of course I want to hear yours as well. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, right? Like I don't have a definitive answer on this, but I have, a little bit of informed education from just research, stuff that you and I know, research on charisma and research on emotions and other things like that. But a lot of it also is, guesswork, just like one of the most popular books that was ever written, like how to win friends and influence people, right? That wasn't based on research. It was just based on observation. And so as we're, having this discussion, I'll try to be, as evidence-based as I can, but I'm not so sure this lends itself well to that. Also, I do want to say this, that statement, we are an experience. I got that from my friend Roxy Safai. I was interviewing her once, and she said that, and it really stuck with me, where she was like, I just see myself that wherever I go, I can create a particular experience with the way that I show up.
I love
And
that.
so she said that I choose to cultivate the experience that I bring, and to bring that experience with intention. And then all we're saying now is saying, well, it's not just your experience, but it's the example you set and the energy you bring. All of that sort of goes into that. And I'll say a couple things here that I think what makes the difference. Well, first of all, I think, and I know many people don't necessarily share this. For example, there are many prominent psychologists. The one I'm thinking about right now is Jordan Peterson, who I once heard say that he doesn't think compassion should be high up on someone's value hierarchy, or that it wasn't on his. And I remember thinking to myself, that blows my mind, because from my perspective, the people that I think we all, sort of gravitate towards and love are people who are very compassionate in the way that they see us. In other words, we don't feel judged. So when we don't feel judged, these are people that we want to go and sit with. Anytime we feel judged, we will move away from that and or not sort of open up to sharing anything. So I feel like one of the things is people who don't have judgment for others. And I tried my best to do that. As a matter of fact, I kind of was lucky because I have parents, my mother and my father, who are incredibly non-judgmental with individuals. So I have two rules that I think encapsulate this idea of compassion and non-judgment. And that to me is, number one, the human rule, right? Which essentially means that no matter what you say to me, I come at this from a place that go, all of us humans are dysfunctional. None of us are gurus. There's no such thing as a guru in my mind. If you're a guru, and you probably wouldn't need to be in human school to begin with, because you'd have everything figured out. So to me, I go, we're all humans, and as humans, we all suffer and we all have dysfunctions. None of us knows everything. All of us have something that we can offer. So the first thing is seeing people as humans and just being like, look, you're not alone in this. You're only human. Something happens when you say something to someone, just be like, look, you're only human. You don't always say it that way, but you go, you know what? I have friends that have gone through this. I mean, I see what's happened. It's only normal. You're not crazy, man. Like, you're not crazy for feeling this way, right? That first thing is part of it, right? Because, and by the way, it establishes over time when you just go, I trust that whatever I show up and tell this person, they're not going to come at me and judge me in a way. They're not judging. They're simply just going, this is a human who's going through a tough time. And then there's compassion on top of that, which is, sort of the rule of empathy or the rule of compassion, which essentially goes, I don't necessarily haven't experienced this, but I can't imagine what it must be like for you. And I can't, because even if I've experienced the exact same thing, I don't exactly know how it's going to be for Danny. So for me, I think these are the starting points, right? And then the final thing I'll say, and I want to just get your sense on all three of these components, this idea of the human rule and this idea of, sort of compassion. And the next thing is, I think it's authenticity, because I think, people pick up on the energy of inauthenticity, right? Like, for example, you say we're an experience and an example and an energetic sort of, we bring an energetic experience and example to the world. But if it's an inauthentic, energetic experience and example for the world, for whatever reason, we humans sniff that out. We sniff it out like a dog sniffing out a bone. Like, we see it from a mile away, and it is very off-putting. Now, I don't know what this is. I just know I do think it's got to truly be authentic. It can't be this thing where it's like, oh, you're only human and oh, I can't imagine. And it's not authentic at all. It has to be sort of heartfelt. And there's some interesting research out of the Heart Math Institute that shows that we do, so the the electromagnetic fields of the hearts of individuals can't do overlap. They extend out of the body and they overlap. So is it possible, that we are actually picking up on that authentic, heartfelt emotion when we're talking to people? So these would be the places that I would start. And I'm really interested to know how you see this.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Breaking into the show real quick because I want to tell you about a brand new absolutely free offer from Next Level Human. And you are going to love this, and it is going to give you fantastic results for your health and fitness. Right now, the research area in health and fitness is all abuzz with something called VILPA, Vigorous Intermittent Lifestyle Physical Activity, otherwise known as exercise snacks or exercise bursts. Think about it this way. You wake up in your day at 8 a.m., you do 1 or 2 minutes of intense activity. Then you go about your day. Couple hours later, you do it again. Couple hours later, again. Couple hours later, again. And maybe finally again in the evening. And what this does, this very short 1 to 3 minute intermittent bursts spread out throughout the day, give you similar benefits to your traditional intense exercise. In fact, a 2022 study in Nature Medicine found that this reduced cancer risk by 40%, cardiovascular disease by 40%. And this was just 4 bouts of 1 to 3 minute intermittent activity throughout the day. When they looked at doing more than that, up to 11 bouts, it was a 65% reduction for cardiovascular events. This is incredibly powerful. And what I wanted to do is offer this free to the Next Level Human community. All you need to do is go to drjade.com/snacks, register absolutely free to get these via email. And more importantly, all you need to do is put your text number in, your mobile number in, and we will text these to you 4 times throughout the day. Follow along intermittent workouts that you can do. These short, intense 1 to 3 minute workouts in video and audio format that you can get to your text, turn on, get them done super quick, and then be done. And the beautiful thing about this, you can do them anywhere during your day because they're so short. You do not need to sweat. You won't need to shower afterwards. This is an incredibly powerful way for us to get the physical fitness benefits that we need to keep our bodies healthy and fit. And I have seen very effective results for people with weight loss as well. So go over to drjade.com/snacks. Get these intermittent, vigorous activity snacks of 1 to 3 minutes free to your email and your text, and start getting results with your health and fitness and improving your health right now. drjade.com/snacks. I hope you really love this free service from Next Level Human. And let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I come from the Next Level Human school with Jade, Teta, so there's a lot of overlap here. You know, it's funny. The one thing I wrote down before you said, I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna add to this, and it's gonna be authenticity," because authenticity is the third key piece. One, because you're right, people can sniff out when you're being insincere, and probably insecure. But when you're being insincere, for sure, they can sniff that out. I also think there's an element of polarization when you're authentic. When you're authentic, you inherently are going to be polarizing. You're inherently going to be different. You're inherently going to be interesting to people because you're not just the same. What do you say? Ball games and burgers, ball games, beers and burgers. Like that's a pretty normal cultural level thing. Like, and I, by the way, nothing wrong with that. I love ball games. I love burgers. I love beers. I love the triple threat. But I think if you can add something that is authentically you on top of that, you can still kind of stand out. And I just think that's interesting to people. So I actually don't have much to add. I think a lot of my Take Care listeners, they joke at me because you get a shout out on every podcast. So I use a lot of your material, use a lot of your frameworks. Obviously, man, we spent so much time together that it comes out. But I do think the authenticity piece is not just about being sincere. It's actually just makes you more compelling of an experience too, right? If you're just a little bit different, we all have a very unique story. And maybe that's where we take this discussion is the who we are story and how that's sort of created and the power of that. I just read Charles Duhigg's new book. He's the Power of Habit guy. You heard he had a new book out, the Super Communicators book.
I saw it, and I thought you'd be on that way before I am.
Man, I ate that. I'm about to go through it again. It's up my alley. I don't know if it's good, but it's good for me. And one of the things he says, we all have a who we are story. And when we can really embody that, that makes us inherently interesting. It makes connecting easier because we're going to draw in people who are authentically like us, and we can slowly build a circle of friends from there. So maybe we kind of go into how we identify who we are story. We can talk about that, but I think the only thing I would add to what you say is authenticity isn't just being about sincere. It's also being about be you, be what you're into, be not what you're not into. Like I don't like rock music. I'll be with a lot of dudes like I love this rock music, and I authentically got simple things like these are benign things, but little elements like that. Like I'm not really into that. Yeah, it's not really my style. Saying no, I think, is a really powerful authenticity tool. So I don't know. I have a small spin on what you said. Otherwise, I'm doubling down on everything. Definitely the human rule. That was the most powerful thing that you and Jill did for me back when I moved in with you guys. I remember I harbored a lot of stuff I was just ashamed of. I was embarrassed about. I was like, I wouldn't tell anybody. And then I would share a little bit with you guys. And you would go, that's so normal. I've been there. We've all been there. And then I would share a little bit more with you guys. And all of a sudden, that shame started to evaporate a little bit. And what's interesting, once I felt normal, once I felt accepted, all of a sudden I was putting myself out in the world a little bit more. I was taking a little bit more risk. I was sticking my neck out because I knew at some level I was accepted on a human level. Therefore, I was more likely to go take some risk out in the world, which is a huge accelerator of growth. So it's a little bit of a paradox. It's that Carl Rogers quote, the first stage of change is acceptance, or whatever that quote is. But I double down on everything you say, man.
Yeah, I love the authenticity piece. Actually, the next level human coaching, when we coach individuals and when I train our coaches, this is the primary thing. This is what I think people don't understand. There's never been another human like you, Danny, and like me, Jade, and like you, the listener, ever in the history of humanity, ever. Nor will there ever be again. That viewpoint immediately opens up an interesting perspective when you realize I am solely unique. Not only am I unique, there's never been me, nor will there ever be me again. And what happens is that's the starting point. But as soon as we begin to disavow our story, that becomes a block to authenticity. And as soon as we're blocking authenticity, no one actually ever gets to know us. And so I have this theory that because we're not truly being ourselves, no one actually ever gets to know us. And I have this theory that maybe is not true at all, but energetically, I think humans understand that. I think somehow they know that there's something I'm not being told, and it doesn't quite feel safe with this person. It doesn't feel all encompassing. It doesn't feel real. And therefore, I'm going to hold back. I think this is one of the first stages. And so this idea of the who you are story, this story we tell, this story, by the way, is very inaccurate for a lot of people. And it's inaccurate for a lot of people because they don't want to share fully, or they, look at their struggles and they see them as something that shouldn't be something that they are out with people or share with people. But not sharing your struggles makes it look like you don't have any, makes it look like you're not human, and you are no longer relatable. So one of the things that I think I have always done is that when someone shares with me this human rule and this empathy rule, the next thing I do, and again, this is stuff that I picked up from my mother, is I do sort of two sort of social chess moves that you and I wrote about in Tribe. And to me, the first chess move is self-deprecation. Now, one of the things that happens here is a lot of people hear self-deprecation and they hear weakness, especially men. But it's self-deprecation without weakness. In other words, it's not taking your power away. It's just essentially saying, I'm human too. So it's not just saying you're human and it's okay. It's like, hey, by the way, I'm human too. It's self-deprecating and being like, I'm on your level, because we humans, we want our status to be equal or a little bit above the next person. So the first chess move, psychological chess move, is I'm just like you. I also mess up. And the next one is to compliment freely and also authentically, which is to basically say, you are powerful in this way, not in a way of blowing smoke or something like that. And that allows people to, and I think you said it best, it allows people to step more fully into their authenticity. It's almost like they have freedom to be more of who they are. And if they see you owning your story, right? Like one of the things that was the hardest for me is talking about my affair, my divorce, my dumb jock, sort of period when I was young, like feeling like I wasn't smart, feeling like, I wanted to hide my anger or, my insecurity around being bullied by my brother maybe, or all the different things that I thought made me weak. Actually, in hindsight, as I've owned them one by one over my life, that is what makes me solid in the eyes of other people. And I think when you do this, two-part chess move, hey, I'm only human. I'm no better than you. And two, you're pretty wonderful, in these ways. What that does is allow people to step up and be more in their power. And I'll say two other things about that. Like if we go back to childhood development and the story of who's who, the first key needs from the ages of 0 to 6 years old, this is very clear in the research, are safety and security needs. And if those safety and security needs aren't solid, we go around looking for those safety and security needs, doing all kinds of dysfunctional things, mainly chasing power and trying to control. So we all know people who have to control every little thing. They're the backseat driver. They need to have everything planned out, or they chase power. When you don't have safety and security, you start controlling things and you chase power. By the way, we all know this turns people off, right? Whenever someone's trying to always come over the top with their power, I'm better than you, or control situations, all of us are turned off by that. We get wrapped up into their control freak energy, right? And that's an off-putting energy. And then the next thing is in adolescence, we move from safety and security needs to mainly acceptance and belonging needs. And if those things are stunted in a way, then we chase popularity, and we do popularity seeking and peacocking, which again is just, hey, look at me, look how tough I am, or look how pretty I am, or look how all this materialistic stuff I have. And, and again, people see right through that because they just go, that's a facade. We see it, we just don't see it within ourselves. And so again, this is repulsive sort of energy. So I do think when we talk about this idea, and I do think it's really nice the way you phrase that, your who you are story, or the history of who you are, it must be owned. And the degree to which our coping mechanisms are authentic and solid, and we can help others feel safe and secure and accepted and belonging because we feel that way, is the degree to which people will want to attach to us. Because essentially all they're looking for is a model to be like, am I okay? And is there anyone in this world I can actually feel safe being myself around? And by the way, I don't know how all of you all feel who are listening to this, but I'm going to say right now, I think most people don't feel safe with other people, and therefore they cannot be themselves. And I think the people who make others feel safe are so incredibly rare that when they're there, they are liked by a lot of people.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Breaking into the show real quick, I want to tell you about a signature program from Next Level Human. And I want to start out by asking you, what is the major thing that is keeping most people from getting the results, the transformation they want in their 4 jobs? What keeps people stuck in health and fitness, in finance and career, in personal relationships, and in finding deep purpose and meaning? Well, from my perspective, the thing that is keeping them stuck is that they think they're supposed to find these things elsewhere. They think they're supposed to be studying podcasts and gurus and documentaries and books and blogs and all of these things. But the fact of the matter is there is only one rule in personal development and health and fitness, and that rule is do what works for you. Now, if you're going to follow the rest of the self-development and health and fitness world, what they're going to tell you is they're going to say, do it my way. Do it this way. Become a carnivore person. Become a paleo person. learn some communication skills, change your habits and your behaviors, and you're going to get the results. All you have to do is follow my recipe, my cookbook tactic, my one size fits all way of doing things. And this does not work, and this keeps us stuck. And so what I wanted to do is create a one-stop shop that gives you all the things you need to create and build a program that works for you in all your 4 jobs. What if there was a hub, a membership that had workout libraries, that had course libraries, that had 24/7 access to ask questions, that had live trainings every month, that had live Q&As every month, that gave you everything you needed to learn what works for you, to master what works for you, and to create and build a lifestyle you can love, live with, and get results from. Teach you a process, not a protocol. And what if all of this, which by the way is crammed with $2,000 worth of value, what if all of that was just available for $20 per month? That's what we have done with the Next Level Human Inner Circle. It is a complete membership, complete with Facebook community, workout library, course library, 24/7 chat access, access to me for Q&As, access to me to see as your personal coach, all the things that you need to get results that match you and your unique physiology, psychology, preferences, and practical circumstances. The inner circle is the thing that I wanted to create that every single person could get access to because it's about as cheap as a weekly coffee habit. The inner circle is what I believe is going to change you being stuck in your personal development and your health and fitness, because it will teach you a process and give you all the education needed and all the wisdom needed to get results. To get involved with the inner circle, all you have to do is go to drjade.com/inner circle. That's drjade.com/inner circle. I cannot wait to work with you inside the Next Level Human membership community, the inner circle. Please go over there right now. Go ahead and sign up, and I will see you on the other side.
Yeah, that's well put. And I think you're speaking to something we've talked about in the past a lot, is kind of lowering your status and elevating other people's status as well. We know that status is one of the core needs of the human brains. We are from back in the Savannah days. Status is a big deal. We're constantly vying and jockeying to have elevated status. And that's why when we get into a room so often and we feel like no one's looking at me, no one's paying attention to me, we have to all of a sudden elevate ourselves and become something that maybe we're not, just to get out there, just to be seen. There's a little anecdote about, I'm going to butcher this. I'm not a good storyteller like our man Ray Hines, shout out. But there's this little girl, it's an anecdote. This little girl is out to lunch with her dad, and the waiter comes by and goes, what will you have for dinner, little girl? And the girl goes, I will have all of your cookies, please. And the father goes, no, she'll have chicken and vegetables. And the waiter goes and looks at the little girl and looks at the father and says, would you like milk with your cookies, sweetheart? Walks away. And the little girl is looking shocked, looks at her dad and goes, she sees me. And the dad's kind of like, what are you talking about? But on some level, we're all kind of that little girl. Yes, I just compare both of us to that little girl. We all just want to be seen. We all just want to be like, am I important? Do I matter? And I love that little anecdote because it's funny. You do this with grown adults too, and just go, I see you. And and elevate their status just a little bit. Now, to your point, it has to be sincere. You can't be like, Jade, you're an amazing basketball player. You're the greatest I've ever seen. If that's not the case, right? That's not how you elevate status, but you can do it in little ways like you're speaking to, by lowering your status, by saying, I've been there too. I've been through tough times too. I've suffered too. And elevating their status. Wow, it's actually really impressive how well you've moved through this. It's amazing how you've handled this. I'm just so impressed. Well, that's one of my favorite coaching strategies to do. I wouldn't even call it a strategy. It just, you hear people's stories in coaching and they go through some hard stuff, and just acknowledging just so you know, that's really hard. Like, I don't even feel comfortable talking about vegetables and squats right now. Like, you're dealing with some tough stuff. You're kind of in survival mode, and you can see their shoulders come down. They're like, yeah, I am. I am. It's to your point about safety and security. But I love both of those points. If you can just make people feel seen and then just elevate their status a little bit by lowering your own just a little bit, people are going to want to be around you to kind of bring it full circle back to being an experience. So I think that's a really those tools working together are really powerful, but that's the essence of it. Status is a need of the human brain. If you lower yours and elevate others, people just love being around you, and ironically, they stop fighting. Like fighting, look at me, see me, look at my accomplishments, They relax and they just kind of become themselves. So I think that was a really important point that I wanted to touch on. And I think we can kind of transition into maybe how to even identify the authenticity piece. I think that's a hard part, that when most people talk about authenticity, people are like, I don't even know who I am. And I always say there's really two parts before you can even begin to grow. One is just self-awareness, which is really hard for people. Like I always sort of shit on personality tests, because if you take a personality test, they are inherently they're self-evaluations, and we are really bad at evaluating ourselves. So you get something that's just probably not true. And probably not consistent, because if I'm feeling in a good mood today, I'm going to be one personality, and if I'm in a bad mood tomorrow, I'm going to be in a different personality. So I don't love personality tests for this, but first part of the formula is self-awareness. I think so many people out there are like, I don't even know myself. I've been playing this culture game, as you would call it, for so long that I feel like I've lost who I am and the who I am story and what I stand for and what I believe. And I think that's the first step before you can even get to self-acceptance and the stuff we were talking about. You have to get to self-awareness. And I think that's really a difficult challenge. I remember early 20s, being around Jill again. And I remember thinking, like, the first part is understanding what I think, and the second part was communicating it. So I went through this whole process where I'm trying to figure out, all right, what exactly do I think? What exactly do I stand for? That was hard enough. And then I started saying it out loud, and what was in my brain never came out of my mouth, ever. It came out like gobbledygook, and I'm like, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant at all. So there's this process of self-awareness it's not a light switch, dude. It's sort of, I call it the Michelangelo model. He has that quote about the statue of David. He's like, the statue was already there. I just released it from the marble. That's, to me, is how human development works. It's not a light switch where you just get to flip something and now I'm self-aware and now I'm in growth mode. It's more of a chisel until David is sort of revealed from the marble. So my question on this is sort of, again, the how. Like, where do we begin? How do we begin this self-awareness process? I have a couple thoughts on the matter, but I definitely, if it's cool, transition into this, dude. So it's basically like, we are an experience, but how do we even identify the experience that we are, I guess, is the question to stay on theme here.
Yeah, well, in the next level human model, the first two principles that you must master are perception and ownership. So I'll start there. So, the definition of being, like a human being, is being, when you're being something, it is alignment in thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting, right? So when you're aligned there, that's your authenticity. You can't be unaligned in thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting. What people don't understand is as they're developing, though, they focus on being, but they don't realize that there's one thing that comes before thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting. Before you can think, feel, choose, and act differently, you have to see the world accurately, right? And if you want to change, you're going to have to see the world differently. This is why perception is the most important thing that any human can master. So it's perception first. And by the way, you said, who we are, who you are and who we are. Who we are is who we've been and what we've done, and who we're becoming and what we will do. That's who we are, right? And so if you neglect, if you disavow who you were, what you did, and what happened in the past, right? What happened to me, how I responded to that, you are essentially disavowing your authenticity. And therefore, in my mind, you can't actually go forward and be who you're supposed to be. Every piece of your story must be owned. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be shared, but I do believe it must be owned. It must be integrated into you. And that's most of the work of therapy and coaching comes down to integrating past things that people simply are not able to integrate. They will blame, they will complain, they will distract, they will deny, they will whimper, and they will whine, but they will not change. So the first thing is to see that those things, all those things that you did were useful in what you can now do. That's the first thing. If you cannot make that stage, you cannot become your next level human self. You will always be stuck in a past self. And people talk about this authenticity a lot. To me, they get this wrong in self-development. It's not authentic to a past self and not authentic to a current self, but authentic to your next level human future self. But in order to be authentic to your next level human future self, you do have to integrate who you were and who you are. But you can't stay there. So that's the first thing. And that all is about perception. Ownership is the next piece, which essentially says, here is who I am now. Here is who I was then. And with this mix, I am now going to write down, stamp in the ground, take my flag and say, this is who I will now be. Out of all the things I've learned, all the struggles, all the difficulties, I will now be this, and I will move forward with this. And that's how you become, authentic. And one other thing I'll say here is that, to me, one of the number one things, if you really want to know what people do, what they're really doing when people feel safe around them, is it's all about emotions. It's what they're doing with their emotions. They have emotional integrity, they have emotional regulation, and they are able to use emotional alchemy. In other words, when you're around someone who has emotional regulation and they're stable, in other words, you're coming to them with an emotional problem and they can stay centered without getting emotional back, that's a person you're going to want to go to, because what you're doing is you're coming with a storm and this person is acting as this giant rock that the storm is just ramming itself against, and they are unfazed. And this allows you to feel like no matter what I come to this person with, they're my rock. They're my safe place. The storm doesn't batter them. And that's because they owned all their past struggles and stuff, and they decided who they're going to be, and therefore their emotions are their emotions and your emotions are your emotions. So they are very emotionally regulated. That feels very safe when you're with someone who's emotionally regulated. Think about in romance what people say. Like, men will say, I want a woman who can nourish me and nurture me. Women are like, I want, someone who makes me feel safe and secure. They'll even use terms like, I want daddy energy, right? You hear that around a lot. Well, what is a strong father? A strong father is this someone whose emotions are regulated, and you can show up with your stuff and they're just solid for you. They just show up for you. Now, the final piece is emotional alchemy, which also means they can take anger and feel it and deal with it and not express it and turn it into motivation and drive. Or they can, there's also this idea of emotional appropriateness. If you're sad and it's not the appropriate place to cry, you can handle that, be emotionally regulated, and cry when it becomes, necessary. So I do think what we're really talking about is someone's ability to emotionally regulate, be in emotional integrity, have emotional appropriateness, and also be able to alchemize their emotions. When we have someone that is just solid emotionally, we're like, okay, like this is my person. Like, I can always go to them. They're always going to be there for me. But in order to have that emotional control, you cannot disavow your past. You cannot. You have to master perception and ownership. The process, in fact, of going through these struggles, that is the whole process that gets you to this emotional point where you're solid. And if you avoid the struggle, you can't become emotionally solid. And by the way, you talked about being an experience for the world. Well, that's kind of what emotional alchemy is, right? Once you have emotional alchemy, you wake up in the morning and you can go, I feel like shit, or I'm sad, or I've got, I'm grieving, or whatever it is. And I go, I got work to do though. And so I feel this and I can do this. And that is an incredibly powerful tool set that almost very few humans have.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Breaking into the show really quickly, I want to tell you about the brand new metabolic female workout system from Next Level Human. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that men and women need to train differently? In fact, let's ask a more simple question. Do you think that male and female physiology is different enough to warrant a different approach to diet, exercise, supplements, and lifestyle? Now, the fact remains that men and women certainly can do the same programs and get results, but should they? Women have 2 major sex steroids, men have 1. Women go through 4 or 5 different hormonal stages in life. Men go through 2. Female hormones fluctuate throughout the month. Male hormones stay pretty static. There are some major differences in male and female physiology and psychology. And in fact, I have spent my whole career trying to understand those differences. And that's why I developed the first female-only workout program back in 2015 called Metabolic Renewal. Millions of people have done this workout program. Millions of women have changed their bodies and their mindsets and taken control of their hormonal situations by doing the Metabolic Renewal program. Metabolic Female is Metabolic Renewal 2.0. There is finally a follow-along program that is done the same genre, the same style of workouts, all new workouts, and even a better system. You know, back when I built Metabolic Renewal, I built it with a team that was essentially a publishing agent for me. And they put a lot of input into Metabolic Renewal, and it was a great program. But it wasn't exactly the program I wanted to create. Metabolic Female is the complete program. 4 levels, each level 12 weeks long. So there's Metabolic Female 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0 for an entire 52 weeks worth of workouts, progressed perfectly for women. And the key thing about these workouts is that they are rest-based. Remember, the female physiology is exquisitely sensitive and refined compared to men. And that makes sense because they are the gender of childbearing. And that makes their metabolism a little bit more stress sensitive and reactive. And so when we build workouts for women, we want to make sure that the workout is individualized for each woman based on where they are in their menstrual cycle, where they are in their hormonal stage of life, and even how they feel that day. That's what Metabolic Female does. It is the only workout system like it in the world today that completely matches the correct intensity so you get enough but not too much, depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, where you are in your hormonal stage, and just how you're doing in your life at the moment. Metabolic Female is now available for everyone. You can go to drjade.com/metabolic female, drjade.com/metabolic female to get the brand new cutting edge rest-based training workout specifically designed for women only. drjade.com/metabolic female. See you in the program. Can't wait to show you what we've done. And let's get back to the show.
Yeah, this is great. Actually, this is perfect because I have this workshop coming up, small workshop with relatively new leaders and managers. And I'm kicking off this workshop sort of talking about perception. I'm talking about mindsets, and I call them the 5 mindsets of effective leadership, essentially. And 2 of them are exactly what you're talking about. The first is that, well, let me back up. My big theme is like, we put leadership on the pedestal, like it's fun, that it's easy, that you just carry all the influence and power. But leadership is heavy, man, and it's not fun oftentimes, and it's lonely at the top oftentimes, and it's a lot of pressure, and the standards are higher, and all of these things it's a lot of work. Like, it's actually not all good all the time at the top in the leadership thing. So I'm trying to flip some of these leadership mindsets to be like, actually, it is hard, but because it's hard, that's why it's valuable. And there's 2 things that I thought of, 2 of the mindsets I thought of when you were kind of sharing exactly what you were sharing. They're right in line. One is that the leader needs to be the most certain in the room. That's a big one. The leader needs to be most certain in the room. It speaks to that being the rock in that when those tidal waves are coming through. And when you say be the most certain, what do I mean? I don't mean that you're the loudest I don't mean that you just say stuff with the most conviction. I don't mean that you just never make a mistake or never fail or never apologize. That's not what it means to be certain. What it means to be certain is to be the most credible in the room. Well, how do you get to be the most credible in the room? Well, on one hand, you have to be competent. You have to be good at what you do. That's just a matter of fact in leadership. But the other piece of this is that you have to have strong integrity. When I say integrity, I don't necessarily mean moral. I mean more how a civil engineer defines integrity. The second definition of integrity is to be unimpaired, sound in structure, like a bridge. That kind of integrity, like the rock in the ocean. The way you do that is exactly what you're saying, this emotional alchemy. I just use the word emotional regulation, but I like alchemy a lot. That's exactly what it is. Being able to understand, process, and digest emotions in appropriate contextual ways. That is so powerful, and people look up to that like crazy. It's exactly what you said. So I'm feeling encouraged. I think that's exactly. I like the rock in the storm metaphor. I think that's exactly what it is. The other mindset I talk a lot about is the one I started this podcast, which is that as a leader, your energy is really contagious. So I had this boss once, short stint at this marketing agency, and this guy something big would go on at the market, like a big deal would happen. We would lose a big customer, and he'd be like, no big deal. We're all good. It's totally fine. And then the next day, there would be an email that was like 7 minutes there in the queue for 7 minutes. Not a long time. And he would burst out of the office like a crazy person and run and be like, there's no emails. What's going on? What is everyone doing? Just the unpredictable energy of that. And what do you think the office was like? It was unpredictable. It was inconsistent. It was a little erratic. And that all fed off of his energy. So being a leader, just being a human experience, you got to be solid. You have to be the one. And that's heavy, man. That's really hard. It's much easier said than done to do this stuff. And the last thing that I sort of wrote down that you reminded me of, I was reading about Freud had the concept of catharsis, something that's cathartic. And we assume in the West, or in America specifically, we think, well, a cathartic experience, that's like you go into these rec rooms. You ever see these, Jay, with like a sledgehammer and you just smash a bus or smash a TV, or it's like just venting. That's cathartic. And this guy was James Pennebaker. He's the guy, the Pennebaker writing exercise. If you don't know what that is, you should look that up. It's a really powerful exercise. He's a professor at UT, and he was talking about this, and he said, but that's not what that's not what Freud meant when he meant cathartic. A cathartic experience is actually what you're talking about, Jade. It's being able to understand and attach meaning to our emotions. So we feel the emotions. It's not just about expressing them. It's about understanding them. It's about processing them. It's about attaching them to our past, attaching to our story, attaching to our future purpose. So a cathartic experience is not just an outpour. It's actually more like a puzzle. It's when you take the emotion and you match it with the appropriate information. That's what a really powerful cathartic experience is, which does make us feel better and is more growth oriented. So I thought that was a little tidbit to share on top of what you were talking about as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I also think, when we're talking about emotions and this whole idea, I think we also get emotions wrong when we talk about them. I don't think, and this is sort of even in the space where, you get into this male, female ways of, dealing with emotions. And a lot of women will say, well, the man's not vulnerable enough, or he needs to express his emotions more. And a lot of men will pin being emotionally volatile on women. And the interesting thing is you'll find men and women who both have this really figured out well. And when you have it figured out emotionally, what ends up happening is these individuals will feel an emotion, but do not have to express the emotion. And I think we get that wrong, right? We think because we feel an emotion that it automatically needs to be expressed. And it's not always appropriate to express an emotion in a particular way. But they will eventually let it out. But I think what you're talking about is far more nuanced. You don't just feel sad and then break down crying. You got certain things to do. The example I like to use is like a warrior in battle, right? If they're fighting the battle, that's the task at hand. It's not appropriate to cry at that point. Like, let's say you see your buddy fall, right? You don't cry there, otherwise you're going to fall, or more of your buddies are going to fall. So what you have to do is you have to stay focused on the job at hand. Now, when the battle's over, now it's appropriate to cry. We don't have this nuanced sort of discussion. And I do think that the individuals we go to that we trust are the ones who are most in control of their emotional states, not suppressing their emotional states, but in control of their emotional states. They get to decide whether it's appropriate for that emotion to be, sort of expressed. And individuals who don't have emotional regulation are oftentimes stiff-armed by many people, their friends, their family, their work, etc. And we don't know why, but that's why. Someone needs to do an entire course. Well, we do, Next Level Human, we do the coaching on this. We teach you how to regulate your emotions. But there should be, this stuff should be taught in elementary school, right? And, like how to deal with emotions. Emotions are meant to be felt, not lived. People get stuck in their emotions and they get controlled by their emotions. So now you're stuck in an emotion and you're controlled by an emotion. This is not being vulnerable. This is not healthy. What you want to be is you want to be able to freely express your emotions when it is appropriate and to control them and not suppress them at any state. I'm not saying take in sadness and leave it there. I'm saying take in sadness, be in sadness. You don't have to express it. And when it's appropriate, when you feel like it's appropriate to do that, you can let that out. And by the way, the degree to which we have people around us who will allow us to express that is the degree to which I think we develop even healthier emotional regulation. As men, as you know, how many people, we hear this all the time right now, how many people do you think would be comfortable truly with you crying as a man in this culture, right? How many men are actually comfortable with that? And the degree to which we become comfortable ourselves and we choose partners and friends who would be comfortable with that is the degree to which I think we figure this out and get more healthy with this. But I do think it does come down to this emotional state, because if you're not emotionally regulated, you won't be able to do the human rule. You won't be able to do the law of empathy. You know what you'll do if you're not emotionally regulated? You'll think very wrongly, but you'll think, I'm not going to give that to them. They're going to just take that and run with it. This is what people who are not emotionally regulated or not in their power do. They don't want to give anyone a compliment because they're afraid they're going to get the big head, or they're going to, but people who are emotionally regulated, that doesn't bother them at all. They also are not too torn up about people who don't like them, right? They had that book that you had me read way back, The Courage to Be Disliked. People who are emotionally regulated have courage. And because think about what courage is. Courage is fear, this emotion that you have that could easily control you and keep you stuck, and the ability to feel the fear and take a step towards it anyway. That's courage, right? And that's emotional regulation. Now, who wouldn't want courage? But we're never taught what that means. And what's the most inspirational thing that you could have? It's courage. It's courage. And I do think when we bring this experience and this example and this energy to the world, that's essentially what we are bringing to people. We're teaching them this is how you have courage. And when we watch someone have courage, it engenders us with more courage. And I think that is really what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a key distinction. I definitely am not or was not advocating that to be a positive experience, to be that rock in the ocean that you need to suppress or ignore your emotions. It's a bell-shaped curve, right? I think for a long time, I think for most of human history probably, but especially through World War I, World War II, there was an issue of emotional suppression. And I've talked to my father about this, who's a Vietnam veteran, and he, talks about he went to a therapist, but he wouldn't tell anybody. Like that was very frowned upon to analyze or assess or learn how to regulate. He grew up in the Northeast, tough environment, went to Vietnam. His dad was a World War II vet, and all these World War II vets in his neighborhood were just so dysfunctional. They're dysfunctional alcoholics, or they were excessively violent, or it leaks out in some way. And then you had the 60s, and I think there was a good correction where it's like, no, it started to become a more emotionally expressive culture, emotionally free culture, just live, laugh, love, whatever those 60s sayings are. And I think that carried into the self-esteem movement in the 90s, like be yourself, be expressive, however you feel is good, is okay. And now I think we're finally kind of coming over that curve where the pendulum has maybe swung a little bit too far, where our feelings are not facts. Our feelings are not who we are. They are a wave of an experience that passed through us. They can provide us direction. They're incredibly useful. That's what you're talking about, the emotional regulation. So yeah, I'm definitely not saying to be that anchor, to be that rock in the ocean, you need to be beyond emotions. That's not what we're saying at all. But it's interesting now we are in a time where I do think now people are pushing that pendulum back the other way a little bit, being like, okay, it's gotten a little out of hand with some of the evidence with therapy is actually just excessive rumination now. People aren't getting better in therapy. And we're just trying to push it back to the center a little bit to say, no, definitely be expressive, definitely process, definitely regulate your emotional experience, but bring it back to the middle to where it's just not your identity and your entire code of who you are. Have this balance in between. So I think that's a good correction that you made. I do have a question for you, sort of, and we can wrap up if you want, Jay. But one question, you used to have this saying. I'm curious if you still stand by it, and if you still. Well, I'll ask it, and then we'll kind of see where it goes. You used to have this saying that it resonated with me a lot at the time, and still does. Actually, it's something I think about a lot. You say, when you were going through some change process, you said, I will no longer tolerate those who see me as I am not, nor as I no longer wish to be. And my question, number one, is that something that you still believe? And if so, maybe you can explain that quote, because I feel like it's been really powerful for me. And then number two, though, speaking of, is it an overcorrection? Is it self-delusion to be like, I don't tolerate people who no longer see me as I wish to be? So they see me as I am, they see me accurately. So is that delusional to be like, I no longer tolerate people who see me as I no longer wish to be?
I still stand by that saying, but I'll make it more accurate for you. So I don't tolerate people who see me a way I'm not, a negative way that I'm not, or a negative way I no longer wish to be. Because the truth is, I very much want to hang out with people who see me and treat me according to my next level, better self, right? Which I'm not that yet. So the more accurate way that I would say that is, I will not tolerate someone seeing me a negative way I am not, or no longer wish to be. I want to be with people who see me according to my best self and treat me according to my best self. Now, here's the part about that statement. I also have to hold myself to that same standard, right? In other words, I can't see myself a way that I'm not, right? So that's the other part. I can't necessarily go, I am this thing now, and I haven't done the work to get there. So there's a flip side of this. I will not, see myself as something that I'm not willing to actually be, right? So that's the flip side of this. And think about that saying. The words are chosen very carefully. I will not see myself as something I am not prepared to actually be, which is, if I'm going to see myself a particular way to protect against delusion, then I must think that way, feel that way, choose that way, and act that way, right? I can't just decide I'm this way. We see this a lot, and this is where it's delusional, right? I always give the example of the American Idol situation, right? Where someone gets up and they sing, and they can't sing worth of anything, but no one ever told them they can't sing. And you're like, you're delusional. Whoever told you you can sing? And to me, I think this goes on a lot. Here's how we know. This is, again, why perception is the critical tool for individuals, because if you don't have the skill of perception, you don't see the repeated patterns, recurrent obstacles, and stuck emotions that are telling you you're doing things wrong. We are, you can call it, if you want to get woo-woo, you can call our higher self, our spiritual selves, are talking to us all the time. And what they're essentially saying is that pattern, that obstacle, that stuck emotion, that's your pattern, that's your obstacle, that's your stuck emotion. It's happening to you again and again and again, which means you're the problem. Right? And so to me, that it's not delusional, because those things correct, right? So to me, I go, your repeated patterns, your stuck emotions, your recurrent obstacles, they're the corrective forces in our lives. As a matter of fact, the human coaches, the people that I certify to do coaching, they are trained to be pattern spotters. Like, that's ultimately what it is. They go through and see people's patterns, because that's another thing, by the way, talking about people who people want to go to for advice and feel safe around. Here's the thing. If you're someone who is a really good friend, and you're going to see a pattern in someone that they can't see. the analogy I always like to use is bad breath, right? Most people who have bad breath aren't going to know they have bad breath. You're, as a good friend, you have to tell them, but you have to tell them in a way that is not going to make them feel horrible about themselves. The only way they would know is if, they've never been kissed, people are keeping their distance, people are offering them gum all the time, then they should get a hint that they have bad breath. But what's really interesting is the people who people love the most are the people who go, there's something I want to tell you, share with you. And by the way, I have my own stuff, right? There's the self-deprecation and this and that. But what I've seen, and tell me if, you can, I always say, tell me to fuck off if you want. Because maybe I'm wrong, right? And I say that, and then I say, but here's what I see, right? That might be a pattern for you. And what almost always happens is when it's said with love and it's said with authenticity and it's not said with judgment, people will have their emotional reaction to it initially, but they will always come back and essentially either be grateful you shared so that they could check in, or they might say, I don't agree, but they will always be grateful for the coaching. And so from my perspective, that's how you keep from being delusional, right? You look at your repeated patterns, stuck obstacles, and stuck emotions and recurrent obstacles, and you also have people around you that are also attuned and aren't afraid to tell you that's your pattern. It's not mine. And I think that's how you do it. And I don't think most people don't want to do that. We live in a world now where it's like if something's going on in a relationship, you're the toxic one. And I just go, if you continue to expose yourself to something toxic, voluntarily exposing yourself to something toxic, then I hate to tell you this, but you're the toxic one, because what else is that then? There's a toxin over here that you keep exposing yourself to. That tells me you haven't figured something out.
Yeah, I like that distinction, man. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because I think that was the back end of that saying was something that I struggle with, because it felt inconsistent, because it was not the last part of I will see myself as something I'm willing to be. So I think that's a really good distinction, but that's interesting. So that's something you still live by and recommend and sort of coach people on as well. That's really cool. Okay.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. As a matter of fact, I think that's the courage to be disliked thing. Like never, I think the degree to which you have people who see you as your next level human self and not your past self is a degree to which you will be happy and fulfilled in life. And the degree to which you can see other people that way is a degree to which you will have friends who love and adore you.
Well put, man. Put a stamp on the episode.
Love you, homie. Yeah, so I will end this. Just stay on the line because I want to, we'll catch up in a minute anyway. But for all you who are listening in live, thanks for being here, and see you at the next episode. You have been listening to the Next Level Human podcast with Dr. Jade, Teta. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and consider leaving a review. You make the biggest difference when you pass on your lessons and inspire others. That's why reviews like this are so powerful. Your words may be the only ones that resonate for someone else. Please remember the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult your personal physician or therapist before making any lifestyle changes. And finally, thank you for who you are in the world and the difference you make.